much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting us. So my name is Alexandra, and I am a lecturer in Portuguese studies and Lusophone studies at King's College London. And today I'm going to talk about a project that I've been developing along with Jonathan at Mon Library. And the title of my presentation, as you can now see, is Reading Otherwise from Dyslexic Lexic to Book Alchemy. So developed together through the combined efforts of the Portuguese section of the Department of Languages, Literatures and Cultures and the Mon Library, Dyslexic Lexic and Book Alchemy reflect not just two projects developed at King's College London, but also my own journey as a neurodivergent reader. Both initiatives reflect a broader reimagining of reading itself, prompting the question, how did it all begin? And in my case, it actually began a long time ago. I grew up in a family of 6 children in the countryside, far from the cultural life of the cities. My parents, perhaps as a way to keep us quiet and out of trouble, often gave us books. And from a young age, in those endless summer afternoons without school or trips to the beach, reading became like going to the cinema. I felt like I could watch a movie with my inner eye while holding the book. After having read the books at home, the local library just a short walk away became my next destination, a place where each shelf offered the promise of something new. And it was there that I first learned to wander in the quiet world of words. Later, as an undergraduate, when I moved away to study at uni, I came to see libraries as spaces where new forms of belonging take shape, where the scent of paper and the soft rustle of pages provided a ground sense of familiarity. And as my academic journey progressed, libraries became more than just places of personal discovery. They transform into living systems, spaces where knowledge is not merely preserved, but continuously generated and reimagined, what I call now architectures of potential. Drawing on George Louis Borges' conception of the library as a metaphor for the universe, an infinite and unknowable structure, and Umberto Eco's view of the library as the living system of both order and generative disorder, I somehow see the library as a constantly shifting dynamic environment, a place for building other futures, and more than preserve the past, places that inspire new ideas and ways of reading and thinking. In this sense, they also hold the potential to function as spaces where reading extends beyond its instrumental function to engage with broader cognitive and creative dimensions. And this is what led to my collaboration with Jonathan at the Mon Library for the Dyslexic Lexic workshop, which became the starting point of the series we now call Book Alchemy. The dyslexic lexic idea originated during the COVID confinement as a response to long exposure of screens and digital technologies. I felt tired of reading on screens, of typing, of endless online research, downloading PDFs, opening links, and navigating this infinite universe of algorithms and data streams. I felt disconnected from the world as, once knew it, and especially during my childhood, organic, tangible, and natural. And my brain seemed to resist this digital overload. And my dyslexia, of course, felt more pronounced. I could see a similar resistance in my students, even in those who are neurotypical. They seemed increasingly reluctant to engage with reading. And that's when I first considered creating objects that embrace these diverse profiles. And with a background in visual literature and graphic novels from my PhD, this felt only natural. In an era defined by varied readers' experiences and neurodiverse perspective, this project emerged as a creative response to a series of critical questions. What if we design reading differently? What if the book invited not just linear engagement, but physical interaction, creative destruction, and reconstruction? And what if meaning wasn't fixed, but instead unfolded through touch, sight, and imaginative play? Dyslexic Lexic thus took shape as a three-dimensional cut and fold interactive book, which is not exactly the image you're seeing now. Now this is the process when I went to the typography, because the pilot was actually a very artisanal kind of project that I enjoyed a lot. Very, very interesting. But anyway, the questions, so it took shape as a three-dimensional cut and fold interactive book where readers build meaning by manipulating cubes containing words or poetic fragments and images, drawing on insights from ergodic literature, experimental poetry, neurocognitive research, and a commitment to recognizing the needs of reluctant readers. This project challenges the conventions of traditional print culture. I created the pilot version, as you can see now, in Portuguese, my mother tongue, as seen in this slide. The word choice is relevant, as Portuguese, as any other languages, of course, presents a particularly complex landscape for dyslexic speakers of Portuguese as a second language. The words here are such as somente, only, semente, mente, demente, share a similar phonetic and visual structure, making them prone to confusion. And for a dyslexic reader, this kind of similarity can be particularly challenging, often leading to misinterpretation. This interplay of sound and form is precisely why I chose the title Dyslexic Lexic. So that's what happens to me in English language. So these sort of similar words that then sound the same, but they are so different. So for me, this is also the universe of Dyslexic Lexic in the language where I tend to confuse them, not in my mother tongue, but in my second language, the English. And so this title is actually to highlight these certain linguistic structures that can disrupt comprehension, of course, this depending on the reader's cognitive profile. So the premise of the project emphasized that the materiality of the text itself can create a unique personal reaction to the printed object. And for me, texts are not just vessels for words, but tactile objects that engage the readers and the reader in terms of the body and physicality. The object, in turn, was to create an object that actively explores this physical relationship, moving beyond the conventional format of the book to engage readers in a more embodied, multisensory experience. And this approach is closely aligned with the principles of ergodic literature, a concept introduced by Espen Aarseth in Cybertext Perspectives on Ergodic Literature. In this context, ergodic literature refers to texts that require a non-linear, often physical interactive engagement from the reader, moving away from passive receptions towards an active construction of meaning. The term itself comes from the Greek ergon, meaning work, and odos, meaning path, suggesting that the meaning is not merely consumed but constructed through effort and through movement. This experimental approach is central to the design of Dyslexic Lexic, where the reader is an active participant, physically manipulating the text to generate meaning in a form of transgression. And this word is actually what lies at the core of the philosophy of both projects, book Alchemy and Dyslexic Lexic. The book deliberately departs from the conventional linear reading experience, challenging the notion of book as a static, preserved object. It invites the reader to cut, fold, reassemble its page, transforming the text into new, emergent forms that resist fixed interpretations. So the images above that we just saw illustrate this concept. It showed the cut and fold templates that form the building blocks of the Dyslexic Lexic experience. Each face of the cube includes both text and an abstract visual element. This design transforms the act of reading into a form of combinatorial play, where meaning emerges from the exploration of combinatory possibilities through two modes of expression, both the visual and the literary. And the aim is to think of reading as a dynamic process of deconstruction and deconstruction, the deconstruction of the book to construct meaning in a reading process that gives rise to multiple unexpected potential combinations. And this text falls also within the domain of potential literature through the creative recombination of literary and visual units. This concept is not new, and it was developed by a group of French creatives and writers, but also researchers. They call themselves Oulipo, Ouvroir de Littérature Potentielle, providing a compelling framework for me to explore the creative potential of constrained writing techniques. It was founded by figures like Raymond Queneau, François Lyonnais, Italo Calvino, and Georges Perec and Harry Matthews. You must have heard about them. So recent research, and I'm now jumping to the next slide, recent research in the field of literacy complements this experimental approach to the text by emphasizing that individuals process information differently depending on their neurological predispositions. Preferences for specific symbols, systems, fonts, colors, and visual hierarchies. To this end, effective page layout and design should prioritize clarity and consistency, avoiding clutter and excessive text. And while dyslexia-friendly fonts can improve readability, high contrast between text and background, the use of matte, non-glossy paper, and careful consideration for line spacing and paragraph structure further enhance accessibility. And in this context, the principles of potential literature and the ouvroir of potential literature and contemporary research in neurodiversity can intersect, offering insights into how textual form and cognitive function can shape the reading experience. Reading is not an innate skill. As Stanislas Dehaene, a French researcher, reminds us, it's a learned behavior that repurposes brain circuits original evolved for object recognition. For individuals with dyslexia, this process looks quite different. They tend to activate distinct neural circuits, particularly involving the right hemisphere and frontal cortex, leading to a slower and more effortful reading experience. But this is not a deficit. It's a reflection of cognitive diversity. And these different pathways reveal the rich variety in how our brains can process language and make sense of the world. This means that the physical design of text and the environment in which we read are not just background details, they are critical components of accessibility. And to speak of critical material engagement is to insist that the material conditions of reading, paper, texture, font choice, layout, color, spatial arrangement are not peripheral to literacy, but constitutive of it. And this is particularly significant for neurodivergent readers for whom the legibility of a text can depend not only on semantic clarity, but also on how a book feels in the hand, how the eye navigates a page, and how welcoming or alienating the reading environment feels. So when I think about the potential within a library, I think about the ways we can challenge norms, how we can reimagine the access, reframe knowledge, and return agency to readers who are often left at the margins. Libraries can be sites of possibility, as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, where different ways of knowing are given space to flourish. How can libraries then embrace these diverse modes of reading? How do we design reading spaces in books that can be materially inclusive? How does it mean to move from preservation to participation? Well, so these are the questions that drive the Dyslexic Lexic project and my own research, pushing me and us all together to think beyond the linear and most of the time digital page, and go into the realm of creative, tactile, and experiential reading. It's about making room for the kind of exploratory hands-on engagement that can transform reading from a passive activity into an active participatory one. And this is where my argument asserts that the library can also be a place for written production, to promote creative writing practices that reveal the plastic and the material richness of language, to explore the potential and the aesthetics of the book, like the concertina books you can see now in this image that we also create in our workshops. And it's also to encourage creative uses of language that deliberately explore its visual and symbolic potential as a tool for thought and creation of artists' books. In this spirit, we've experimented with concertina books and other tactile formats that invite the reader to engage with text as physical, spatial, and visual objects, but also to explore non-linear reading, as you can see now in this slide, these two images. So as we move forward, we need to think about how we can continue to challenge the norms of reading, to rethink how texts are designed, and to expand the possibilities for those who engage with them. And this isn't just about accessibility, it's also about reimagining what reading can be, and ensuring that our libraries and learning spaces are spaces of creative possibilities. And so if we move now to the next slide, Jonathan, thank you. It's also exploring meaning and play with the book as well. So, and we can move on to the next slide. I find this experimentation, for instance, with stamps particularly useful for people who, have to deal with dyslexia, because they help a lot with visual memory. So the way we manipulate the word and we manipulate the letters creates a huge, difference, because as we are using a lot our right side of the brain, the visual part of our reading is activated. So bringing images to this process and having a visual support, it helps a lot divergent readers. If we move then to the next slide, I'll leave the question to my colleague, Jonathan, who is going then to show us how libraries can support reading with this sort of material experimentation, and will take you through the book alchemy project that we have been doing these last few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. So for this last section, I'm just going to show you some images of the things we've been doing. So Alexandra really provided the imaginative initiative. Oh, now why is it doing this? It's got some, obviously it's got timings on it. All right, well, to be honest, it doesn't really matter. I think we can just let it run. We in Libraries and Collections helped to make this happen. We facilitated the process. We found a good room suitable for about 15 students or staff. It was open to all. A light, very spacious room, storage for the art materials we would need. And of course, what we also then provided was a steady supply of books, because using actual books was going to be a key part of what we were doing with both Dyslexic Lexic and then Book Alchemy as it became. So as far as the books was concerned, we were basically making use of withdrawn books, and that was why it was useful to have access to the library and getting the library involved in this work. Most of our withdrawn books are recycled by book rescuers and other partners. And so they're donated, they're reused. But some are passed to us as raw materials for our workshops, especially those that are maybe too damaged to recycle or are no longer of educational value. We would advertise Book Alchemy with posters around the libraries, our library spaces, and also on social media, as you can see here. That top one on the right, in fact, was for a Valentine's Day workshop that we did, where we had the focus on, love as a theme. I'll just show you some images of the creative space that we had. You can see here lots of stuff going on, very dynamic, creative environment. The pleasure of ripping books apart, dare I say that as a librarian, but it was a novel thing for the students to find they were being invited to cut up books or pull them apart or otherwise reuse them, transform them into some new object. And here's a photo where we can see someone cutting up text into different lines to then create a new statement, a poem, or whatever it might be, or maybe something that doesn't even make that much sense, but then becomes part of a kind of visual experiment. Oh, something I forgot to say is we would also, on the day of the workshop, put notices over the tannoy so that anyone who hadn't seen the posters or the social media, they might think, oh, that sounds interesting, maybe I'll just turn up. So we had lots of students who would just drop in on the workshop. I'll show you some examples of some of the things we were creating, a few two-dimensional examples to begin with. You can see here kind of mixing visual and text. Here's one from our Valentine's Day workshop. Then there were things like this, sort of blackout poetry or something where you would take a page and by reworking that page, you would then highlight certain parts of the text and create a new story or create a new idea. That was quite popular. And another one that we've already talked about were concertina books. These were also very popular. Or things like this, where we had a collage of text, but also physical use of the books. So here someone has created a kind of butterfly book. We had a butterfly stamp that you could use cutting out paper. And so she's turned the book into a kind of book of butterflies, which is rather nice, I think. Other examples here where image and text have been inserted into a book, or where a book has been turned into a sort of flower in a vase. Or here where we've also included dry flowers and image. Or here where a book has been turned into I love this one, it's like a reed bed. I don't know why these slides are jumping on all the while. A reed bed with birds within the reeds. And then finally, what we would do at the end of each session of workshops, we do 3 or 4 workshops, we would then have an exhibition within the library using display cases where we would show some of the works that had been done. Here's an example of the last exhibition we did. So this was the way of working with Alexandra's ideas, the kind of theories behind this work and the creative work that she'd begun, then by bringing it to students and in fact turning it as much as being about kind of experimenting with text and image and thinking about this different way of working creatively, transgressively with text and image. It also became a way of working in a kind of well-being way. We would build it into our take time out weeks at King's, where people would do lots of different kinds of activities. So we built it into that. It became very much a time for students to step away from their studies for an hour or two. So that was another kind of positive effect of what we were doing, and with very positive feedback from the students. And it's also then become another way of doing things like team day, team away day activities. We've just run a book alchemy today for a staff experience festival that's going on at King's right now. And so it's having these different iterations, different forms in which we're using this whole process, beginning with the ideas that Alexandra has put forward. So I think that's all we need to say, unless there are any questions from anyone.
We did have a question from Sheila about the watercolor images. She says, the watercolor images are lovely. I wondered who created those.
I think actually the ones we were looking at were mostly yours, Alexandra. Let's go.
Yeah, but but I would say mostly the participants. Yeah,
Yes,
because
this was a student.
students, yes, exactly. And then we have one from Sarah, the beautiful one with the angel.
That was Sarah,
This
about
is,
staff
yeah, exactly.
members.
That's not a watercolor.
This one was also Paula, another one of another staff member.
Yeah, exactly.
And then this is one of yours.
That's one of mine, a old one.
Apparently the one Sheila was interested in was in Alexandra's slides.
Okay.
That makes any sense.
Which one that was? Let's see, how can I shoot back? Maybe if I stop the slideshow, that might be easier, and I can look.
Oh, the boxes. Oh, I created those. Sorry. Yes, exactly.
Boxes.
Yeah. No, I painted all of those. Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, the ones you're now seeing. Yes.
Beautiful.
Because my ambition was a lot bigger, because I wanted to actually create a graphic novel, but then I realized it's too complicated because you need to create, infinite possibilities for them to coordinate with one another. And so I thought, no, let me just do a combinatory poem, and then I can do some abstract paintings in a way that they don't lead to the final message. Because if you, as I explained, if you're led by the image, then you created a sort of a puzzle, or the cognitive experience will be pretty much like doing a puzzle, and I didn't want that. So I really wanted to emphasize the combinatory aspect of the poem, and so I couldn't give any visual clues. So that's why I tend to go to the abstract. And then I created one in English, but because Portuguese is my native language, so I could explore language in a more abstract way than I can do it in English. But the English version gives you a lot more clues, and then the combinatory aspect of it's a bit vanished. But yeah, this is a very simple kind of experience in watercolor. It's just basic. Anyone can do it. So I just, if you enjoy, I just strongly recommend that you just download any sort of cube form from online, and then you do your own paintings and then play around and create your own poem and book. It's really kind of easy to do. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We have a question about the demographics of the students that attended the workshops. So were they art students or from other disciplines? Do you have that kind of information?
We do have some information, and Jonathan, you'll help me here, but most of the students, they are the students who go to the Mon Library to study at King's. So they come from different backgrounds, from geography, from masters in political studies or international studies, from students who are doing mathematics or technologies or even languages, but mainly the age spreads along the 20s or 19s onwards. So all students that actually study at King's, regardless of being an MA or PhD or undergraduate students, because I can see lately that we have also MA students interested, so which is very interesting as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't think we have any other questions that I've seen. So that's probably a good place to wrap up this hour. And I'm sure you will all join me in thanking Jessica, Lee, Alexandra, and Jonathan for joining us today and sharing
Thank you very much.
Their research. Thank you so much, everyone. So we will be taking a 15-minute break now, and we will see you at 4:45 or 4:45 the hour, wherever you are, for the next set of sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.